Not long ago, I stumbled across a desk toy called Maclock, which, as its name suggests, is an alarm clock that resembles an original Macintosh. What made it especially compelling to me is how accurate it looks. The proportions and details are all surprisingly faithful. I thought how much of a shame it was that this thing is just a basic clock and wished it could do more. Then I was reminded of a project from 2021 that outlined how to 3D print a mini Mac enclosure and stuff a Raspberry Pi inside to run a Mac emulator. It was pretty popular, and at the time I built one myself. It's a great project, but I had always been bothered by the lack of detail imposed by the 3D printed parts. So when Maclock came along, I knew exactly what needed to happen. I chose to call this project Wondermac. It's a reference to Wonder Boy, the Chinese company that makes Maclock. I started by cracking open the case. This is probably the hardest part of the whole project since it's clipped together pretty tightly. I found that a wide metal pry tool worked well to separate the front bezel from the back, starting at the bottom. Don't be fooled by the screws. They're just decorative, mimicking where the screws are on a real Mac. Once the front panel was free, I could unplug the wiring harnesses connecting it to the back. One goes to the power input board and the other to the touch sensor on the top. The screws securing the main circuit board came out next, then I could remove it. I was trying to figure out how much room I had to work with here, so the screen also needed to go, which is secured by screws in the corners. I found that it has 3 layers: the backlight diffuser, the LCD itself, then a curved plastic lens that simulates the look of a CRT. The actual backlight LEDs are mounted to the main PCB. Pretty clever. Sticking with a Raspberry Pi made the most sense, and I chose the 02W since it's compact, low power, and relatively inexpensive. This kit from Seed Studio is nice as the pin header is pre-soldered to the Pi. It also includes a heatsink, something I wanted to install as there would be no active cooling in the Wondermac, along with a USB on-the-go adapter in case I needed to connect a keyboard and mouse to the Pi. There's an HDMI adapter in the box too, though that's not needed for this project. The heatsink has an adhesive thermal pad pre-applied, so I just needed to peel off the backing and stick it to the Pi's processor. The screen in Maclock is custom and can't be repurposed, so I had to find something else that would work. I ended up with this, a 2.8-inch screen from Waveshare with a resolution of 640 by 480. It plugs into the Pi's pin header, and something important to note is to not press it down all the way, partly because the socket on the screen is too shallow and also because of the heatsink. I had to make sure there was a small space left between the heatsink and the back of the screen so it wouldn't risk damaging the FlatFlex cable connector. I wanted to tackle the software side of things next before I got too far ahead of myself. I stuck a micro SD card into my computer and launched the Raspberry Pi Imager app. This makes it easy to get an operating system on the card, and there are several to choose from. I went with the 32-bit version of the latest Pi OS at the time, based on Debian Trixie. After selecting the SD card as the target, I entered a hostname, Wondermac in this case, then supplied my localization settings and set up a user account. Configuring Wi-Fi is pretty important as it makes interacting with the Pi far more convenient, so I added my network information. Enabling SSH is a good idea too, though turning on Raspberry Pi Connect is totally optional. Then I told it to write the SD card, which it ejected when it was done, but I reinserted the card back into my computer as I wasn't quite done with it yet. The Waveshare screen needs drivers in order to work, which are documented pretty well on their wiki. I just needed to add a few lines to the config.txt file on the card, then copy some files to the overlays folder. Then I could eject the card and stick it in the Pi. If you'd rather avoid SSH in the command line, you can use the USB on-the-go adapter to hook up a keyboard and mouse to the middle micro USB port. The port closest to the edge is for power, and it took the Pi a few minutes to boot. By default, the display works in portrait orientation, which I didn't want, but I decided to set the Pi up for remote control first. I connected to it through SSH, then ran the Raspberry Pi config tool to enable VNC. Between these two protocols, a keyboard and mouse aren't really necessary at all. One limitation I found was that the VNC viewer built into modern versions of macOS won't work with the Pi, so I needed to download a different client. But I could connect using the same credentials I used with SSH and set out to rotate the screen. The settings are in the Control Center under the Screen Configuration section. I found that I needed to rotate the image to the right so it could work for my purposes. Because the LCD also has a touchscreen, the on-screen keyboard gets enabled by default, which could get annoying quick, so I disabled it. That was it for the basic setup of the Pi. Now I needed to get an emulator working. My first thought was to use a newer piece of software called Snow. It's quite capable and sees active development, plus there's a version available for Linux on ARM processors like what the Pi uses. But I couldn't get it to work. It would only ever launch to an empty window. After chatting with some of the developers, I tried compiling a version of it from source directly on the Pi. This took forever, but again, still didn't work. We came to the conclusion that Snow, while a great piece of software, was just too demanding for what a Pi Zero was capable of. I had to look elsewhere. The original Mini-Mac project suggested using another emulator known as Mini-VMac. It's been around for a long time, and it's lightweight and optimized for performance. Problem is, it wouldn't work on my Pi either, but for a different reason. Mini-VMac hasn't seen much development lately, and the version available for download is too old for the latest versions of the Pi OS. Thankfully, I figured out a path forward. Like with Snow, I needed to compile my own version from source using the latest beta available. Snow had taken something like 6 hours to compile on the Pi, but Mini-VMac only took a couple of minutes. I used an FTP client to copy over a Mac ROM file and disk image, crossed my fingers, and launched Mini-VMac. And to my relief, it worked. The last thing I needed to do was a little bit more in the command line to set Mini-VMac to launch when the Pi boots. This makes the whole thing hands-off when you plug in the power. With the software situation sorted, I turned back to the hardware part of the project. There's a battery in the Maclock that could be interesting to leverage, but I decided for the sake of simplicity to remove it. The back housing has a USB-C port for power, and I really wanted to take advantage of it. When I went to measure the voltage, though, I found it was only delivering about 4 volts instead of the standard 5. What was going on here? The port is part of a PCB screwed into the back housing. That board also has the connector for the battery, so I unscrewed it to take a closer look. I found that it has some circuitry on the back side, centered around a 4056H chip, which is a charge controller for the lithium-ion battery. After digging into the layout of the PCB, I decided that a bit of a sledgehammer approach would be the easiest. I desoldered the chip and found that the PCB was, perhaps unsurprisingly, very cheaply made, as it was easy for me to accidentally lift a pad in the process. This big resistor also needed to go, and of course, I made a mess of that too. I needed to use that pad, but no longer trusted it, so I ended up running a bodge wire directly from the input pin on the USB-C connector over to the output pad where the chip was. Only 2 wires from the harness that went to the clock circuitry are needed, the pins labeled plus and minus, as the others are used for monitoring the battery. The harness itself has 4 wire colors, but each end is pinned out opposite of the other. Just to keep the wire colors recognizable, I made sure to connect it to the PCB so that the red and black wires were on the plus and minus pins. And with the USB cable plugged in, I was now getting 5 volts. Exactly what the Pi needs, so at least my hack worked. And in an effort to redeem myself, I did the same surgery to a board from another Maclock and had much better results. This is what the modification is supposed to look like, and you can see how we're basically just taking the power input from the USB-C port and patching it into the output of where the chip used to be. Everything else here goes unused. The green and yellow wires aren't needed, so I clipped them off where they plugged into the PCB. On the other end of the wiring, I found I could pry up the tabs on the connector and pull the pins out. There are 2 test pads on the back of the Pi that can be used to supply power, so I soldered the pins directly to them. This saved me the trouble of trying to strip and tin such thin gauge of wire. Finally, I used Kapton tape to secure the wires so they wouldn't put stress on the solder joints, though some hot glue here would probably work just as well. Of course, if you don't want to solder at all, there's a much simpler solution. Just drill a hole in the back housing and feed through a right-angle micro USB cable to connect to the Pi. I wouldn't blame you if you took this approach, but to me, the cosmetics do leave a lot to be desired. Anyway, to secure the Pi and screen to the front housing, I designed a 3D printed bracket. The screen friction fits into place, and it's important to print the bracket with black filament as there's a chance part of it could be visible when everything's assembled. With the clock PCB removed, there's nothing to hold the brightness dial in place, and that leaves an ugly hole in the front bezel. I caught this while designing the bracket, so I was able to include a post for the dial to sit on. The dial's only cosmetic now, but at least it's there. Some of the plastic on the front bezel needs to be trimmed for the screen to fit. These little pins next to the screw standoffs have to go, followed by this bit on the right side. I was able to use flush cutters to remove the bulk of it, then followed up with a craft knife. This doesn't have to be perfectly flush though, as the thickness of the screen lens pads it out. But with the lens in place, I could peel off the protective film from the LCD and drop the whole bracket assembly into the front bezel. The original screws got reused to secure the bracket to the existing mounting holes, then I plugged the wiring harness into the power input PCB. I hooked up a USB cable to test that everything still worked, and thankfully it did. So then, it was just a matter of snapping in the front bezel, and I was done. Of course, it's not quite perfect. The brightness dial and 2 buttons on the front don't do anything now, and I decided I didn't really care enough to want to tackle that. But something else may bother some folks, that being the screen borders. This 2.8-inch LCD was the closest thing I could find that would fit, but that means it leaves awfully thin borders around the screen opening. Something I really like about the Maclock is that even these borders look accurate, and I wanted to figure out a way to replicate that. Those borders are actually part of the original LCD, and since it's clear, it made the most sense to just reuse it. So I whipped up another bracket design that allows for sandwiching the original LCD between the screen lens and waveshare display. These bezels look much nicer with the caveat that they block some of the displayable area of the screen. With some work, you might be able to hack the display drivers to show a smaller resolution with unused areas blanked out, but that's beyond my ability. Let me know if you come up with something. Otherwise, I'm pretty happy with the results. This project isn't exactly cheap. Between the parts and cost of the Maclock, it ran me about $100 US. But it's straightforward to put together, and I've put links in the video description to all of the parts, the 3D bracket models, and a GitHub repo with instructions for the software side of things. Keep in mind that software is always evolving and parts may go out of stock, so you may have to figure out alternatives if you try to build one of these later on. But figuring this one out to begin with was actually pretty fun for me, and I learned a lot in the process. There's farther you could take it too. The Maclock uses a fake floppy disk as the power switch, and it wouldn't take much to wire it in series to turn on the Pi. Or maybe you could turn the disk opening into the slot for the SD card, get the buttons and brightness dial working, or add sound. If you pull any of this off, I'd love to hear about it. In the meantime, I'm content to let my Wondermac just vibe out on my desk with the After Dark screensaver. Does this thing serve a practical purpose? Absolutely not. It's entirely for fun. But that was the whole point of Maclock anyway, so it's neat to see how this mini Mac ended up with a lot of potential. If you liked the video, I'd appreciate a thumbs up and be sure to subscribe. Here's another episode you should check out, and as always, thanks for watching.